The most emotional of all events that took place in 1984 is, of course, the violence that was perpetrated in Delhi, specifically in November, following the assassination of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. It is said that she was assassinated by two of her Sikh bodyguards in vengeance for what she had done by invading the Darbar Sahib. And as a result, many of her supporters and ordinary citizens, particularly those in Delhi who were so distraught at her assassination, took their vengeance in turn on the Sikhs that they encountered throughout the capital city. But here is where we start to find a number of problems. Quite specifically, that this is termed riots is where the problems begin. Riots, mob violence, is something that happens spontaneously. Whilst much of the violence that we see perpetrated in November of 1984, again centering in Delhi, takes place in an organised and very structured manner, almost as if it was pre-planned. This is where we find the work of one Dr. Sangat Singh starting to develop an idea that had, until the publishing of his book, The Sikhs in History, had been only rumour. Some people had suggested that Indira Gandhi had a much bigger plan to utilise in annihilating the Sikhs throughout the country. That the invasion of the Darbar Sahib, Operation Blue Star, was step one. That the attack and disappearances of Sikh youth throughout the months that followed through Operation Woodrose was step two. And to strike a real blow at the heart of the Sikh people across the country and force an annihilation of sorts would take place pretty soon from when she was actually assassinated. The rumours suggested that this operation even had a name, that it was termed Shaanti. It's quite funny to think that a word meaning peace and contentment would be used for such devious means. But Sangat Singh writes in The Sikhs in History that Operation Shaanti was very real. The author himself had belonged to a ministry in the 1960s that belonged to part of the Indian central government. By the 1970s, he was a key member of intelligence, and so many people have taken his words as having real authority, that there is some truth to this idea that Operation Shaanti was something that was going to be brought into being. What took place when Indira Gandhi was assassinated, it is then suggested, is a mini version, if you like, of what Operation Shaanti would have really been. Some of that which we see that took place in the violence in November points to the fact that this was orchestrated and organised, pre-planned to an extent, and was not spontaneous. There is the fact that so many of the crowbars and iron rods that were being used to attack Sikh businesses, homes, and individuals themselves were all of the exact same size. Not roughly the same size, but exactly the same size, as if they had all been cut to measure and were all being distributed to people who were perpetrating the violence. There is the fact that the police themselves were disarming Sikhs instead of protecting them from violence, thereby allowing the perpetrators of the violence to attack Sikhs en masse, where they were not able to protect themselves. The fact that some have suggested they were under orders to do so points to this being an orchestrated, planned event. There were numerous MPs who were present at different locations throughout the next 10 days following Indira Gandhi's assassination. And again, it has been argued that they had gathered there to target individual people and locations that would be next on the hit list for perpetrators to go and seek out Sikhs to kill. Such lists of where Sikhs existed in a capital city would have to have existed prior to Indira Gandhi's assassination and been easily accessible on the night following her assassination for the perpetrators to go out and find these Sikhs en masse and start assassinating them and looting their shops, again pointing to this being a pre-planned and orchestrated event. A number of ideas have been presented in the various commissions and inquiries that have been held into the events of November 1984 to suggest that there is more to the mob violence that was being perpetrated, that it wasn't spur of the moment, these were not riots, that they were orchestrated and pre-planned. It was put to the Nanavati Commission that Congress leaders had conspired not only to select the locations and the specific targets, but which orders would be put to members of the armed forces and the police when dealing with the situations that they would find on the ground. Further still, certain key witnesses put to the Nanavati Commission that they specifically heard members of police forces telling mob members that they could loot and kill as much as they wanted. They had carte blanche to do as they wanted. At the PUDR inquiry, a journalist made the claim that the army had told him they had no orders to help people who were being burnt alive before their very eyes. These are not the acts of individuals who were acting out of emotion and hatred for Sikhs who they saw equally to blame as the two bodyguards who had assassinated Indira Gandhi. But these are the acts of people following orders, who are following a chain of command, who are seeking out an operation that had been planned to take place some weeks in the future and was now being put on at the spur of the moment.